Okay, here's 998 Sierra Charlie at Baublitz Airport 9W8 in Brogue, Pennsylvania again. We're doing some practice landings, takeoff and landings, just keep my skills sharp and continue my learning process and my proficiency improvement in regards to landing on grass strips. Grass strips are generally easier in many respects, but harder in others. They're not particularly level, and they're a little bumpy. So one of the things that I've accomplished over the last few outings is I've improved my directional control very well. Got decent coordination in my turns. The only thing I still have a challenge doing is controlling the descent rate and the attitude of the plane as soon as I touch and a few hundred feet after I touch. So I either am coming down and hitting the ground a little harder than I would like, not hard enough, pulling the stick back, not pushing the stick forward enough, not using the throttle the way I should to cushion the movement. The good news is on all of these landings I'm pretty much maintaining good directional control. So I need to keep practicing my stick and rudder skills, particularly the pitch control as I approach landing on the last 5 feet of descent and the period right after the descent. I think what's happening to some extent is the bumps are causing me to react to the bumps rather than to the runway. So if I touch down properly and then I hit a bump, I seem to push the stick forward, and then maybe the nose goes down more than I would like, and then I pull the stick back, and I'm kind of changing pitch too much. You can see my hand is moving too much when I'm landing. So my takeoffs are pretty good. We're holding center line very well. The plane's performing well. It's a nice 63-degree Fahrenheit day. Winds are higher than what was forecast. They're blowing from the north, so we have a right crosswind. I expected it to be a little bit from the west. In this case, it's probably a direct crosswind, so there's no headwind component to it at all. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 miles per hour crosswind, more or less, maybe closer to 7 miles per hour. So it's not enough wind to ignore it, and you'll see that I have to use a little bit of right aileron to keep the wing down as I'm approaching, and a little crab when I'm approaching, and a little bit right aileron to keep the wing down into the wind. But again, I seem to be able to maintain directional control pretty well. So the first takeoff and landing, whenever you're practicing every couple weeks, as I am, is usually a little bit rusty, or perhaps not as good as you would like. A lot of things to keep track of. In this case, I turn a little bit late again on my final, so I have to bring it back online to the center line, kind of an S turn. No harm done. So the plane is slowing down pretty much at the numbers, so to speak, a classic reducing throttle and adding flaps as we begin our descent on the downwind side. We'll continue our descent as we turn base. The descent rate in this section of the downwind turn will probably be something a little bit less than 500 feet per minute, 10 feet per second, and we may accelerate it to a higher descent rate or a lower descent rate to adjust it so that we arrive on our final somewhere between 400 and 500 feet above the runway threshold. In this case, that would be an altimeter reading of somewhere between 750 plus 400, 1150 feet and 1200 feet. So right now we're returning, and we're right on target with about 1100 feet as we finish our turn on final. We're probably 2500 to 3000 feet out, and we're traveling at about 88 feet per second, so it's about a 32-second drop, and So therefore we need to be dropping at about 10 feet per second, which is what we're doing. Push the carb heat off, which is what I need to do to make sure I'm ready for a go around. Over the threshold, a little bit high, could be lower. So I'm going to land at about 300 feet in. We touch, bounce a little bit, hold it, hit again, hold it, use the rudders, lose speed, pull the stick back. So we used about 1,400 feet of the runway there. Not my best landing, but generally speaking pretty safe, and particularly maintaining center line, and I didn't porpoise, I just did a nice little hop. So we'll try it again. This time we'll this time after we take off, we'll come back and we'll just do a fast approach with no flaps, just to get a feel for how the airplane's handling. I haven't done a descent for a long time with no flaps, so I want to get used to flying at slower speeds with no flaps, and also just get an idea of how the plane is reacting to the wind. So I'll fly down the center of the runway, 50 feet off the ground. Then we'll go out and do some turning exercises, do a figure eight, basically practicing my 2-minute turn rate and my steep turn. So you know, a 2-minute turn in this plane, generally speaking at 60 miles per hour, is figure 50 knots divided by 10 plus 7 is about 12 degrees bank, is what it takes to do a 2-minute turn. That's a 360-degree turn in 2 minutes. Then a steep turn is anything over 30 degrees, so we'll try a couple of those. But generally speaking, we're doing figure eight, trying to maintain a nice constant radius circle, compensating for the wind and getting feel for the plane when bank, and comfortable with the coordination of the rudder and so forth. Here we're taking off at about 600, maybe 800 feet. Between 600 and 800 feet, we're probably crossing a 50-foot obstacle at 1,200 feet, which is according to the POH. We're doing okay. And climbing is 20 feet per second is more than 1,000 feet per minute. So the plane really does well once you get speed up to 70 miles an hour. That's its VY speed. Practicing my rudder control to maintain my right rudder and keep that ball centered in my right turns. Plane requires a lot of right rudder on a climbing turn. Climbing left turn anyway. See, I still have that tendency to drop that right wing. You see the roll as I'm sitting here flying the plane at about 2 to 3 degrees. That ball's a little bit to the right, so need to keep working on that. I need to move my back to the left to compensate for my scoliosis. Right here we're doing a steep turn, 30, 33, 34 degrees bank. See if we can maintain our altitude, maintain our speed more or less, 80 mile an hour. Nice tight circle. we'll roll to the left. We roll to the left at about 130-degree heading. We won't turn it quite as steep in the left-hand turn here. Now I've got the rudder under control, holding the ball in the center pretty well. As we turn away from the wind, we'll be speeding up a little bit on the ground speed, so we'll want to perhaps steepen our roll, pitch, or roll a little bit. Alright, decent control of altitude and speed. Make a pretty steep turn here and turn back towards the airport. Now we won't be using flaps on this descent, so we'll come in a little bit hotter, a little bit faster. Stall speed with clean, no flaps is somewhere around 40 miles per hour, so 1.3 times that would be 52. So we're well above that speed when we descend, but without flaps the plane doesn't want to slow down as much as you would think. So there's the airport off to our left a little bit now. At 10 o'clock. Alright, pull carb heat on, slow the plane down. And we're going to do a slip to lose some altitude. Trying to get it down to about 1,200 feet before we turn on the base. And a little bit late, turned after the house instead of before. So we'll have to do a little less turn to get back on the center line. No problem. Altitude looks okay. We're still a little fast. Wouldn't want to land at this speed. We'd want to come in no hotter than 60 miles an hour with this plane. But we're not going to land, we're just going to do a low pass. We get to be about 50 feet off the ground. And then see if I can level off, maintain that altitude more or less. And speed. So now we're flying along ground at about 90 miles an hour. And we'll do a little zoom here and see how much altitude we can gain. What's our best climb rate if we put the nose up in towards the sky? Alright, we're peaking at 25, let's say 25 feet per second. 25 feet per second is a pretty impressive climbing rate. That's 1,500 feet per minute. Of course, you can only do that for maybe 3 or 4 seconds. We had to push the nose down or we would have stalled as we were approaching 60. Alright, now we're going to do a normal pattern and do our second landing of the day. See if we do a little better. Try a little different technique, improve on the last time. I didn't climb quite as much as I would like, so I'll put 1 notch of flaps, but I won't pull back on the power, and that'll climb me up about 1,500 feet pretty quick. Alright, now we can pull back on the power some, pull the carb heat on, start slowing down. Ground speed on the GPS shows about 55, 56. Indicated speed's 50. That's what we were going to descend at, is somewhere around 50 to 55 miles an hour with full flaps. We're not quite full flaps yet. We'll be in a second. I didn't want to take my hand off the stick, so when I gave it full flaps, I wanted to, or second latch of flaps, had to adjust the trim. Trim is the little button on the center of the stick. Alright, now we're descending at about 55 miles per hour. We'll slow it down a little bit more. Turn right on the house, pretty much where we're supposed to be. Altitude is good. Alright, here we go. Our descent at 10 feet per second, 600 feet per minute, more or less, 500-600 feet. And we should maintain that descent rate until we approach the threshold. About 10 feet off the ground. Pull back the stick just a little bit, reduce that descent rate, and hold it, and we touch. A little bit of a tail low attitude, no problem. Pull the stick back. Decent landing. That's probably a classic full flaps Cubcrafter's landing with the tail low, but not quite a 3-point. Good directional control. Wasted a lot of runway though holding it off. So I didn't hit my touchdown point where I wanted it to. I had to pull the stick back to reduce the descent rate, hold it off too far, and so I wasted probably 200-300 feet of runway. Alright, let's try it again. This time we're going to take off. For the first time I've done this in the plane, I've done it with full flaps just to see if it would take off without too much drag, which it did. Now I'm going to use 1 notch of flaps and see, which is the recommended procedure from Cubcrafters in the POH. See how fast it jumps off the runway. Alright, 1 notch of flaps. 200 feet. 300 feet, we're off the ground. A little bit of stall warning, so you have to be careful. And we're clearing an obstacle at 1,000 feet. We're clearing a 50-foot obstacle at 1,000 feet, so it really does make it for a short field takeoff procedure. Just got to watch it that you don't stall the airplane. As soon as you jump off the runway, you need to be sure you don't keep pulling the stick back. The first notch of flaps on this plane really does provide a lot of improvement in lift. Alright, I'm really doing much better job holding that right rudder on my left climb here. You have to keep inputting aileron. You can't just get it turned into a bank. It will return to level flight if you don't keep giving it a little bit of aileron. But I'm finding that it's probably a better technique to just more digitally and introduce it instead of giving it constant aileron. I'm giving it sort of a measured dose and then back off and give it a little bit measured dose again. I'm sure there's others that would criticize that technique, but it seems to be working okay for me. Alright, now we're going to do our classic descent. Pull carb heat, first notch of flaps, pull the engine back to 1500, 55 miles an hour indicated, 60 miles an hour ground speed, GPS. Alright, second notch of flaps. Alright, we'll be third notch of flaps now. And we're a little bit hot. Nice steep turn on final. Kept the ball where it's supposed to be. Didn't skid. Carb heat off, getting ready for a go around if I need it. Descending at 10 feet per second, a little bit higher actually. A little bit crab to the right to compensate for the crosswind. Now we're in slow motion. Alright, we're declining at classic 10 feet per second, which is what I want. I'm going to try to be low on the threshold so I can land in the early part of the runway. Alright, now I'm going to reduce my rate of descent, get it down hopefully into the 3 feet per second range before we touch down. Obviously we're going to maybe do it more closer to 5, and we touch down at 4. Give it a little bit of correction on the aileron. Okay, hit a bump, pulled back to stick, which I probably shouldn't have done. Now I'm going to push back to stick. So I'm entirely too much movement of the stick fore and aft during the rollout. I need to work on that. That's my next project, is try to keep the stick more stable during that rollout section of the landing. Alright, so the tail's going to come down here in a second. It's down all the way now, just about. I'm going to pull the stick back in a second. Alright, take off the flaps. And the tail's all the way down. So again, I was able to maintain pretty good directional control. The biggest issue was moving the stick too much, over controlling the plane, particularly with fore and aft pitch control. Doing a pretty good job with the rotor. Speed is decent. So again, that's the area of improvement need to work on, is over controlling pitch during the landing process, particularly during that last 10 feet of the descent and the actual rollout. So another day at 998 Sierra Charlie at Baublitz, and we'll keep working on getting better. That's the whole purpose of these practice sessions, and to me that's what being a pilot is all about, is a constant improvement in your abilities and your proficiency.